Hey there everybody, Brandon here coming to you on the channel. So on this episode we're going to be painting a tree, not necessarily this tree. In fact, let me show you a picture of the tree here. So this tree that we're going to be painting in this one, this is a large tree that my niece actually just recently had a wedding underneath this tree where she got married. And so for a basically housewarming gift for her Christmas present this year, for her new home and her marriage, I'm going to be painting this tree for her. And so this video here is going to give you a quick walkthrough of my process of doing that. So let's go have a look at that now. So I started out here with my 18 by 24 canvas and I sketched in my overall tree, and then realized that I probably should have painted my background sky in first. So here you see me painting in my background sky kind of around the main branches of this tree. So note to self in the future, painting a tree like this, that I have to do a sketch. I want to make sure I get the main pieces of the tree correct, because this is a very specific tree obviously. Paint the background sky first and then do your tree sketch over the top of your background sky. It'll make life a lot easier. So all I'm doing here obviously is using a 1/2 inch wash brush to get in this sky color, and then move on to the tree itself. Same wash brush here, and just laying in dark mix of brown and black here to lay in a real dark background tree trunk color that I'll come in and do highlights on top of. There is going to be a sun that is bleeding into this just off center to the right, so the sky there in the upper left is a little darker blue, just because of the natural way it looks. In terms of where the sun is, will be brighter back there, so it fades out the sky color a little bit. That's why that top left corner is just a little darker blue than the rest. And so now, yes, just finishing in these main branches here. After the tree trunk itself, I've switched to a slightly smaller brush here for the thinner branches. And now moving on to the ground, back to my wash brush here, just fading in some brown color. There will be some sunlight that's hitting this that I'll be putting in later. And there's some lighter colored sand in this as well, so I'll be coming back through here with some lighter tones to put in the sand. And then now, back to my wash brush, putting in the background tree line that's way off in the distance. You just take the tones of these colors down here so they're not real vibrant, and put in just some basic shapes there in the background to look like a distant tree line. And then our vibrant foreground colors will pop across that, adding the dimensions that we're looking for. Working on some of this ground here now, so this is going to be a mixture of light and dark here, because there is sun creeping through these tree limbs. So there's going to be some places, there's going to be some bright highlights here along the ground where the sun is actually hitting, and then other places where there's shadows, and then there's a mix of sand down in here in this dirt. So we're just doing contrasts of darker gray, lighter gray, darker brown, lighter brown, to create the look that we want. And then ultimately I will come back in with the last little bit here will be where the sunlight itself is hitting, and then I will at the end paint some rays of that sunlight that's coming through the tree limbs that will be touching down on the ground here in front of us. So now Jen started to touch in some of those areas where I feel like some sunlight will be poking through, so tapping in some bright highlight colors in some random places where sun is coming through this tree, hitting the ground, creating some bright spots. And then again, ultimately, like I said, in the end, coming back with some sun rays that'll also be hitting some of these as well. This is an area that you just kind of work till you're content with it. You can do too much here if you don't stop yourself, so eventually you just have to say, okay, that's enough. You don't want to kill all of your dark shaded areas. Obviously there's more shade here than there is sunlight poking through, so you don't want to get too carried away. Moving into some tree highlights here, small 1/8 of an inch angled brush where I'm touching in individual bark texture with lighter grays and even some kind of a mossy green look here, because there is some moss that grows on this tree, and there's also Spanish moss hanging from the limbs that will be hanging. Just putting in the bark textures that we can see on these limbs that are coming out closer to us. And again, just a variety of highlight passes of some grays, some tan, and a little bit of green here and there as well. Putting in enough detail that when you look at this painting at any kind of distance, you can see enough bark texture to make it realistic. Now moving into some of these areas, and I didn't get too carried away with the background sky around these major limbs because I knew I was going to be coming back in here with shadowed tones of leaves. So I'm now putting in some of the thicker areas here with this about a 1/4 inch angle brush that I have here, and then there will be some highlighted leaves here on this back side where the sun is hitting from the opposite side of the tree. And so there will be some highlights to be put in along the back edges to show where the sun is hitting, and then all the underneath leaves themselves will be a darker shadowed color. So I'm starting here on this underneath left corner, trying to create that effect here, and there's a little bit of trial and error going on for me here at this point, trying to figure out how I want this to look in terms of what colors I want to use and the shapes that I want to bring out. So I ultimately decided that I was going to now dig back into the old school Bob Ross bag here. So I have pulled out a full 2-inch brush, and to create these leaf textures here, individual leaf textures that are creating shadows, but you can still see some sky or some sun creeping through there, I'm just tapping in the end of that brush to create that. So in the essence of saving time, just know that all that dark green there I just tapped in to create that. Now you'll see me coming back in with the same 2-inch brush, tapping in the end of that brush with the lighter yellow highlights that are on the outside edges of those leaves that the sun is hitting from the opposite side. So I'm just kind of picking and choosing places now where we can see highlights of sunlit leaves, essentially. Once I got that look basically finished, it was now time to come back in with some individual leaf texture. So here I have moved back to my small 1/4 inch angle brush, and I am individually now picking and choosing places to bring in either some dark shadowed leaves that are extending out along these edges, or I'm bringing in individual brighter highlights. So anywhere I can pick out some very specific highlights here, which for me is just creating that overall detailed final look that I'm striving for. And again, this is just a personal preference and taste thing at this point. You can add as much detail as you want in these types of areas, or as little detail as you want, depending on your style and how you're going about these paintings. I've switched to my smallest brush at this point to add in the last little bit of tree tree leaves, the leaf highlight and texture here, before moving on to the final step, which will be creating my sun rays and beams that are showing through the tree. So to do that, I'm using this straight edge here, and then I am coming from my focal point of where the sun is down to the ground in a straight line. And the key here is really thinning out the paint. So you got to thin this paint out. If you're using acrylics like I am, you can do it with a variety of different mediums, or you can do it with water to thin the paint out. If you're using oils, you can do this with paint thinner or whatever, but the point is you're trying to create a translucent paint that can be seen through. And so this one got a little thicker than I want where I'm working right now, so I'm ultimately going to come back here with my finger and thin that one out, scrubbing some of that out literally with the end of my finger and a touch of water. So I've created that translucent look that I was going for. And so any place that I want some sun rays coming through, I just use that straight edge to create this final image. So you can see here when I zoom in that you can indeed see through those rays of light that I created, because that paint was very translucent. Spanish moss hanging out some of these limbs as well that I put in. And then just working with this until I got the image where I wanted it. Put the date in of their wedding there at the bottom using a stencil, because my handwriting is terrible, so there's no way I could get it to make it look halfway decent. And so there was my final image of this shaded tree with the sun coming through. Hope you enjoyed that process. Until next time, happy painting, everybody.